Hi, I'm Yvonne Webb of Action Coach Business Coaching.
And I'm Stuart Clark, the Managing Director of Russell & Russell, and we're the co-hosts and sponsors of the Glasgow Business Stories podcast. If you're enjoying Glasgow Business Stories, then why not subscribe to the channel? There's new videos dropping every fortnight with great business stories from great business owners, so we don't want you to miss out.
Chris.
Hiya.
Welcome. Thank you for coming on Glasgow Business Stories.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's just start off by you telling us who you are and what you do.
So my name's Chris Wilson and I'm the Chief Executive of Golden Charter, a funeral planning business based in Glasgow.
And tell us a bit about your background and what led you to this point in your career.
I'm a bit of a mongrel probably. I've had an amazing career, been very lucky. Started out as a lawyer in Edinburgh, and that was great grounding, and found my way into Royal Bank of Scotland in 2004. Slightly by luck and by accident, which was great. And I got a great 14 years at Royal Bank of Scotland. Two parts, really. I worked for the insurance business that became Direct Line Group. That was amazing because I got to fulfill all the claims for their customers. So that was 400,000 car repairs a year, whole of home repairs. So really getting in amongst how to run big organisations and how to look after customers and sort of fairly needy times. And then I went into retail banking. So I was the Managing Director of Royal Bank of Scotland and looking after all the branches in Scotland, which again, you're helping customers at moments that matter, whether it's the first home, the first car, or whether it's, we've talked about before, if somebody's died and you're having to deal with their estate. So again, really nice to be in community banking. So various things in financial services broadly. So fixing cars, retail mortgages, commercial finance, and so gathered up a few skills and was then called by Golden Charter 6 months ago, a business which is this incredible Glasgow success story, which many people perhaps haven't heard of. We've got the leading funeral planning business in the UK based out of Bothwell Street in Glasgow, helping, we've got 350,000 customers that we've helped with end-of-life planning, something which not enough people talk about and something which is incredibly important. So as I said, a bit of a mongrel, but always with a sort of eye towards probably, I ran Green Flag for a while, the breakdown business, probably customers that are in a moment that they could do with a bit of a help and they might not know what to do, whether my house is leaking, my car's smashed up, I've broken down, I don't know how to get a mortgage. That's probably, I've got a bit of a calling towards that if I was to look for a thread running through it all.
And did you practice law when you...
I did, yes. Yeah, commercial law. So, which again, I've always had a leaning towards business. I started my first business when I was 11, which involved, I'm afraid, theft.
Oh.
So my dad he's an amazing sales guy, my dad, and he used to have, the pens he would give to doctors as medical sales. So I used to snaffle some of his free pens and I would sell them at school with the most amazing deal, which was 25 pence each, or believe it or not, 4 for £1, which shows how good they were at maths at school. So I used to sell pens, and then I started an egg run when I used to sell eggs around the neighbourhood and cakes and bacon. I just have always, whenever I was sort of lying daydreaming, I was always thinking, well, if I bought a bike and I would fix the bike up, I could sell it for more. So for some reason, my brain's always wanted to work that sort of stuff out. So I did commercial law, which was great to work with entrepreneurs buying and selling businesses early on.
And what have been the key things you've learned throughout your career in terms of running a business, running teams? Are there any key threads that you think are really important?
Goodness me, Yvonne. Running teams first. I think what I figured out probably too late is that when I was early, I was by chance and by situation, I ended up, I'd never had a member of staff. And then I had a team of 30, and then I had a team of 3,000 in the space of about 12 months, which, that's quite a learning curve. And that was when I was we ran the repair centre for Direct Line Group, I did. So I had a team fixing 400,000 cars a year. I knew nothing about vehicle repair whatsoever. I've never even set foot in a garage properly. And probably early doors, it's quite intimidating to have lots of people that are much more senior or people that have got more experience working for you, and you feel you should know stuff. I think what's been very liberating is realizing that when you've got teams, it's not your job to know stuff necessarily. It's to be curious and ask questions to figure stuff out. And so that's what's come to me a bit later, which is don't feel you have to know the expertise of the people that you work with, because surprise, surprise, they're the experts. But how do you take a group of experts and bind them together towards something which is meaningful and special, and then clear the path out the way and just ask the right questions as you go that may think, oh, we never thought of that. Maybe that is something we could look at. So I suppose with teams, it's learn to ask great questions, not feel you have to have the answer all the time, because that's very limiting. Again, if you're somebody like me who can have ideas from time to time, I've learned the hard way that sort of keep your mouth shut on the ideas as much as you can. Store them up, write them down, come back to them, and only when they keep coming back again, maybe that's time to give it some oxygen, because there's always opportunities to do something different and better. But if you get distracted, you'll lose focus. So I've learned the hard way is focus. What is it you've got to do? Deliver it. And only when you're really good at delivering it, better than anyone in your market, you can start to maybe do something different. And not saying you shouldn't innovate, but you should innovate around the thing that you should be really special at, not just start, we could do that and we could do that. I've seen so many scale-ups get excited about, look at all these opportunities, and, busy fools.
So you're seeing learn the hard way. Is there any failures that you're kind of like, we tried this and, we went down the wrong path because we just got too excited and tried too many things at once?
Definitely. I mean, we could spend the rest of the podcast talking
Is there
about,
one in particular that kind of sticks?
I suppose there was a specific problem we were trying to solve. The details aren't really helpful, but we tried to solve a problem in insurance, and it involved very expensive car hire, because there were companies that appeared that cause a lot of cost in car hire, because when someone's car's been smashed up, you give them a replacement car, and there was a new trend appeared that you could make that very expensive, and it was a form of income for insurers, and it wasn't very pleasant. So to solve the problem, this bright spark thought, we'll start our own business doing that. And then you could argue it was the right maybe approach, and we were doing other things that were working, and we were sort of turning the tide in a bit, but that was a bit of, I probably now would say that was folly, because that wasn't our specialism. Far better to partner with somebody whose specialism that is and solve the problem than think you can always build something. I think, so the lesson for me is, again, know what you're good at, and that's where you should win. If you can see an opportunity around that your customers are telling you that would be helpful, don't always have to build it. Find someone where that's their specialism and say, listen, we've got an opportunity here. We've got a lot of customers. You've got a great skill set. Can we do something there? So, and that's a bit of a recurring theme, I think, for my time, and sometimes for businesses we've worked with, which is feeling you always have to do everything yourself. I think that's probably not a good approach.
I was going to say, that maybe ties in with what you're saying about not necessarily knowing what the business did. Do you think that helped you manage the team? Because I think, when Yvonne and I are working with business owners, quite often they've started up, they're so involved in the day-to-day, they find it hard to let go, or they find it hard to manage the team. Like, do you think having that separation and be able to go, actually, my role is just running the business and being MD, that helped?
It's a brilliant insight, absolutely, because one of the things that you have to have expertise in a business, but I think it has to sit in one of two places. It's either in the team or it's in the boss. If it's in the boss, you can bring talent through and you can give people, put them in a big jacket and see how they do. And whereas if the talent's in the team, then the leader or the boss can say, actually, I don't have to be an expert, because the expertise sits within the team. And I think what happens with scale-ups in particular is that somebody's very good at something. If you think about sort of restaurant analogy, there's a chef somewhere who's built, this is a great dish. Someone loves this dish. But what's the restaurant like? How do you scale it? How do you make it bigger? You're great at making that dish, but how do you come up with the next dish? There's lots of skills you need to run a restaurant as opposed to have a great dish. And what we often see is the people that scale a business, they keep focusing on the dish and not the restaurant. And I think almost literally two hats. I think when you can take your hat off, and even in a growing business where you've not got a C-suite of a marketing officer and a commercial officer and a product officer. By the very nature of growing a business, you've all got a few hats to wear, but it's a good discipline to recognize which hat you're wearing. If you're the CEO that created a new product, quite often you'll find them getting involved in the product guys' work and forgetting about the pipeline for sales. And you have to sort of say, look, hang on, put your product hat over there, put your CEO hat on and think, what's the biggest problem right now? And it's not the product, it's the pipeline. So look over there.
So your hat as MD was more focused on the strategy, and you say like,
have a plan.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly that. And now, I think one of the things that I've also maybe picked up along the way is the important thing is the planning, not the plan. And there's various sort of Mike Tyson quotes about getting punched in the face around this stuff. But broadly, figure out where you think the market's going. As soon as you figure that out, of course you're wrong because it's not accurate, but directionally. And then work out how you would respond as the market does that. And again, it's not going to be right, but direction it's going to be right. But by the planning process helps you to sort of course correct along the way. Sort of locking on that is what we are, that's what we do. If you've not got flex in your plan, then you might end up just keep dogmatically bashing away at something which might not be the right thing to do. So that would be another one of my lists. Maybe the planning is the process. Be strategic. Don't have a strategy. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Actually knowing what you want to achieve. The way you get there might change, but the end goal's still the same, and having that kind of focus on that.
And therein is the sort of excitement of leadership, I think. I think our job, if you will, is to figure out, based on our purpose, which I know is a very sort of trendy word, but genuinely at the heart of why do we exist? What is it that we make possible in the world? And with that commitment and passion, you can kind of see the promised land. We're aiming for that. We never get there. But if you can set that, then people can work out, okay, there's something in the way here, but we can see that in the distance, so we can find a way around it or over it or under it or through it. But we know that we're heading in the right direction. If you don't set that ambition or that sort of North Star, if you will, then you can be wandering off in all sorts of different directions as an organization. And you can't unleash the talent of people unless, I'm all for empowerment, but it has to be freedom within a framework. And the framework says, look, guys, we're going to storm that bridge. You go work out how to get there. But it's that bridge over there. It's not the one down there, it's not the one back there.
And so I do want to speak about Golden Charter, but before then, am I right in saying that as part of your career journey, you had your own consultancy business for a while?
Yes, I did.
So can you talk to me a bit about that, why you did it, what it was for?
So I think Royal Bank of Scotland was amazing. And I grew up in a business where I got amazing training, but I felt I wanted to refine my strategic skill. There was a business partner I'd worked with for years, a guy called Paul Lee, who's an absolute genius, brilliant strategic mind. Honestly, it was a choice about being a better dad. I was away, I was flying to Dublin for 2 years, I had 3 children, and they were at an important life stage where I thought I could see a future where I would come home from the business, my job, and say to Lauren, where's the kids? And she was going to say, well, you've missed that bit's gone. And that kind of scared me a wee bit. So I thought, no, well, that's not. So Paul and I, and Paul, who was my business partner, he had his son Vincent, he had quite severe autism, and Paul needed to sort of manage Vincent, who's an amazing young man. So we got to a point where we thought, well, let's start a consultancy business. And it was a total fluke, because I decided to finish up in Dublin at the Royal Bank of Scotland. Loved my time there, feel very fondly about it, and start a consultancy business with zero experience as a consultant, no clients, and no real plan. So,
How did that go for you?
Well, it was really jammy, as they say. Now that I'm back in Glasgow, I can say it was really jammy because, fortunately, at the Royal Bank of Scotland, we did some amazing work with STV and STV Appeal, and we raised just over £1 million for children poverty because, charitable giving as an organisation should be about your purpose. And we were about a sort of thriving Scotland. So we did great work, and it was with Sir Tom Hunter. And I think I got on quite well with Sir Tom because the Hunter Foundation are a big part of STV Appeal. And so when I was setting up the business, I reached out to Tom and said, can we have a cup of tea? So I went for a cup of tea with Sir Tom in the middle of Glasgow. Lovely chap. Told him what I was planning to do, and he was like, good on you, Chris, and thanks for all your help over the years. And then the phone went the next day from you and Hunter, from the Hunter Foundation, who were just setting up the Scale Up Scotland programme. And Ewan said, hi, Chris, I was chatting to Tom. We're starting this programme for Scale Ups in Scotland, and we've had a cancellation for a day's speaking about strategy. Would you be interested? And I was like, I'm going to I'll come back to you on that, Ewan. I'll see it's at Loch Lomond in 6 weeks' time. And I'll have to check on that year. I'll see what I can do in my diary, which was empty. I'll give you a wee call back tomorrow, you. And so, I phoned Paul and said, listen, my business partner. And so we wandered into Loch Lomond and we talked to these amazing businesses, including Uni Pizzas that we spoke about earlier on. Dorina was there. Amazing businesses like that. And we were lucky enough to work with them, and we still do. So we still go once a year to Tom's place down in Ayrshire. And we get the privilege of talking to these amazing businesses. And the back of that, many of them became our clients. And I looked at your sort of Tony from Silver Cloud, a whole bunch of the guys you've spoken to. We were lucky enough to be their advisors and helping them get to that scale-up journey. So it was a total fluke. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it, working with businesses. But I have a calling back to, it was always a point in time to become more strategic and experience growing a business, but more importantly, be a dad. And I had a breakfast, lunch and dinner for 5 years, which has been extraordinary. But there was a calling back to actually running a business.
And so tell us about Golden Charter, who you are, what you stand for, what you do.
Golden Charter is, I think, an amazing business in Glasgow that people arrive there, working there, like I did, not knowing who they are often, because we deal with death and people don't want to talk about death. So we're in the death game. There's a whole sort of fear of, there's a fear of dying, and it's understandable, but there's more of a fear of talking about dying. So there's this amazing business in Glasgow. They've been there for 40 years, Golden Charter, and we are a financial services business. We enable independent local funeral directors to help customers to pay for their funeral. People that are worried about leaving their families with debt, leaving their families worrying about how they're going to pay for funerals. But more importantly, perhaps, helping families talk about what they want to happen when they die, because that's a really sad time. And if you have to spend your time thinking, gosh, how am I going to pay for it? What did mum want? What did dad want? We are committed to helping people have those conversations in advance and enabling those conversations through our approaching 3,000 independent funeral directors throughout the UK that we support with financial services products. So there's this absolutely sensational business in Glasgow, very purpose-led. It's a kind business, which I've always been looking for. And I mean, kind's a really important word in business. It's not nice, it's kind. And you walk in the door and people they're just so enthused by the fact that we're doing something really purposeful in the world. So I'm here and I'm out and about raving about this business because I want to queue out the door. Because if I was a graduate coming out of university, or not even a graduate, coming out of school, anybody, I want them walking in our door to say, what a place to learn about marketing, to learn about pricing, to learn about investment management, call centre management. It's all there. So it's this beautiful business in Glasgow that I need to shout about more.
And it's doing something for people as well. It's taking care of people. It's a kindness there, isn't there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And kindness is a word which, I've been accused of kindness in the past, which is quite difficult because in larger organisations, I literally had a discussion with a good friend of mine who was chief exec. And he said to me, Chris, it's the only time I've heard nice used in a pejorative sense. And I didn't know what pejorative meant. I had to look it up. But it isn't a great word, right? Because you can't, but I have an underlying belief that, and kindness is not about, as I said, it's not nice. It's believing in something and being so committed to that you'll do what's required. And that's having difficult conversations. But I think that sort of well-intentioned kindness in organisations will win in time. And I'm excited to be working in a business where it's part of what we do.
And what percentage of people in the UK have a plan or give us an indicative number of how many people have actually planned what they want to happen at the time of their death and actually make it easier for their loved ones because they've made their plans clear? How many people have kind of thought about that?
So we've just done a whole lot of research on this because this week is National Funeral Planning Awareness Week and we're running a campaign which is the most important conversation you've never had. And so it's all about 4 and 5s. 4 and 5 of people are aware, haven't told anybody what they want to happen, but want people to have a meaningful send-off. So there's lots of contradictions. They want meaningful send-offs. They don't want budget send-offs, but they haven't told anyone what they want about their funeral. And only 1 in 5 people have paid for a funeral advance. So prepaid funerals are about 20% of the market, which means 80% of the time it's what you call an at-need funeral, i.e. somebody's died. Okay, we need to organise this now. Now, they may have had a conversation about what they wanted, but it's very low. Because if you think about that moment, you don't want to be worrying about paying for it or what songs to play, or is it a burial, is it a cremation? You just want to be worrying about your grief and how you remember the person that died.
As you said, I was going to say, as I said earlier, 5 out of 5 people are going to die. So it's not something we should shy away from. It's something we need to be more frank and open about as well, to have those discussions.
There's a taboo about death, and it all happens behind the curtain. And I understand that. But I had a wonderful conversation with a celebrant. I have this sort of, the lovely part of becoming to a new business is learning the business, the trade. And I met with a celebrant, and he said to me something quite profound, which is maybe fairly obvious, but he says, grief will follow you around until you turn around and embrace it. And it's a bit like death. Until you embrace it, it'll follow you around. And so I'm finding being in the industry and seeing the compassion and care that's out there, it's sort of demystified it for myself a little bit, and I'm actually more comfortable talking about it. I told Lauren I want a natural burial because I think it's quite nice to be put in the ground, and there's trees around the place. I don't want people having to feel they have to wander up and visit my grave, although that's absolutely fine. So I'm quite clear on that now. And I was at an event last year. Apparently you can get a mushroom coffin made from mycelium where they grow the coffin. I thought, well, that's quite nice, moss bed. So, it's okay to, it's going to happen, so you might as well have a chat about it.
I don't even know what a natural burial is. Is that in the field somewhere in the
Pretty
wild?
Pretty much. It's not like a recognised building plot. So I went to see a wonderful crematoria in Dumfries last week. Very sort of quite a forward-thinking crematoria, and they have planted an orchard. Or not an orchard. It's trees, and you essentially say, oh well, I'll have that tree over there, and they can sort of fan out people underneath it. So if you want to have people there, you get buried, but there's no headstone. There's just you're in a wood full of trees, which I think is quite beautiful. So, and there've lots of alternatives now.
And why do you think people don't plan in advance? Why is it 1 in 5? Is it because the people themselves don't know what they want, because they don't know what the options are, like the natural burial that you've just described, or is it because they're fearful of talking about it? What's the barrier?
I think it's classic avoidance behaviour. That's going to make me uncomfortable. Therefore, I don't want to talk about it. And we had a brief chat before Yvonne about avoidance behaviours. If it's not crass to bring death analogies to business, but in life, the most important conversations are often the most difficult ones, whether it's a performance conversation about, I think you could be better, or whether it's a, can I hit payroll this month conversation. There's all these important conversations that we have to have, which when you're under pressure or worried, there's avoidance behaviour creeps in. But, lots of pithy phrases, what you resist persists. It's going to be there, so deal with it. And listen, I'm not great at this sometimes as well. We all do it. But I think death is the sort of ultimate avoidance behaviour. I don't really want to think about this, therefore I'm not going to talk about it. Well, guess what? As you said, Stuart, it's 100% chance it's going to happen to you. So you might as well have a chat about it and just sort of say, this is how it's going to be. Go on, Stuart.
No, I was going to say, I think it's like kind versus nice again. It's having that conversation is maybe a bit awkward, so it's nicer to avoid it. But actually, the kind conversation for your loved ones is to go, this is what I want, this is what I'd like to do. And it's the same within business. It's, we talk about in the team as well. It's like, if someone's underperforming, it's easy to avoid it. It's nicer to avoid it. But actually, the kind thing to do is say, look, you're not performing, here's why, or is this the right role for you, or how can we support you? But it's not always the easy option, but it's the kind option.
And performance management, I was lucky enough at Royal Bank of Scotland. They do incredible training about coaching conversations, and that discussion there. My first performance review was devastating for me. I'd spent 7 years to qualify as a lawyer, right? It's hard graft, and 6 months into my first seat at the law firm where I trained, I got at 6 o'clock at night. When I was leaving the department after my 6 month seat, I sat down with the partner I'd been working for, full of beans, thinking, I'm great at this. This is a skoosh. And he said, how do you think you're doing, Chris? I went, well, I think I'm pretty good at this. I'm doing well at that. And he said to me, you'd be the only person that thinks that, Chris. Or words to that effect. It was devastating. 7 years work. No one's told me what's going on. They didn't bother with a 3 month appraisal halfway through my time there. At 6 o'clock on the evening I'm leaving the department, you told me, you're not very good, Chris. with no ability to do anything about it. It was devastating. And it's left a scar that's never gone away. And my wife, Lauren, who's an incredible coach, she keeps coming back to this sort of monkey on my back. And so that conversation you described there, Stuart, about, I had a great training about it, that if somebody isn't making it, if they're not quite getting there, the conversation says, well, how do you feel that's going? What worked for you? You got to get them into the positive frame of mind. What's working? You observe them do something. And you say, what was great about that? What worked really well? And what they'll immediately say is, I wish I'd done that differently. You say, stop you there. What was really good? What was great about that interaction or that way you did this thing? Great. What would have made it even better? What was it you felt if you could have had that, that would have been even better? People know what they need to do to make themselves better. And if they figure out themselves and you commit to help them with that, there's a decent chance they'll do it. Whereas that normal conversation, which is, that wasn't very good, do this, this, and this, it'll be better. Nobody listens to that. They just feel crap. And that's not helpful. So that kindness is not about saying, and I don't mean you were saying that, it's not about saying, you've got a gap, you should be better at that. It's about saying, what was amazing about that? And how can I help you be even better? And then commit to doing that. So that's where kindness, I think, is hugely important. There and then at the lesson. I feel very strongly about that. Yeah.
But it's got to be timely as well. Do you know, as I said, there's no point in having that conversation with the team members 6 months or after the third or fourth time they've made a mistake or whatever. It's like, you've got to have it the first time before the pattern emerges so you can actually, because, you know, if you're sitting it and it's the fifth time it's happened, you're sitting there, you're frustrated going, why have you not done this? And they're at a totally different place. They're going, I'm doing brilliant. No one's brought this up before. Exactly.
And it's the distance between your expectations is miles, whereas in the moment, and it's like, it might be nothing. It's like, that was more of that. Because if you think about if you're a sports coach, you got a talented player, it's like, actually, I'm going to move you. You're going to do that position because you're so impressive when you do that. You're an impact player. Let me get you doing more of that.
Yeah.
You know what? But be aware when that happens, you might need to do that. Yeah, fine. So
I think, what you framed really nicely there was the ability to ask questions, because I think a lot of the time in leadership, people don't ask enough questions and get the person to think themselves. You know, we talk about put the thought bubble over their head, not yours. And it's a skill to be learned to ask those questions, isn't it?
Oh, it's beautiful. Just curiosity, being curious and stopping that. I'm jumping straight in because you get me in a topic I'm excited about. It is that mindset of answer a question with a question. What do you think? What have you tried? Okay, why didn't it work? What could have made it work? How would you do that differently? You know, it's just constantly asking questions, because I take the view, when people figure things out for themselves, then they're accountable for the outcome, and there's a decent chance it might happen. When you instruct someone to do something, you're accountable for the outcome. And it's like, well, that's what you told me to do. So it's totally different.
Going back to like you being removed, I think that helps as well, because you've got that curiosity. But also, you know, it's easy just to show someone. It's quicker. To actually ask those questions takes longer. And if you've not got time in your day to actually do that, it becomes hard. And it's like, I'll just show them because it's quicker. But actually, you're creating a rod for your own back. Whereas, if, as you say, if they come to it by themselves, or you can help build their confidence, in the long run, that's going to pay off. But you need to invest that time at the start rather than just, here's what the answer is, and spoon feed people.
It is. It's reminded me of a great friend of mine was talking about, because a lot of this, and without being patronising, leadership and parenting have got a lot of parallels. And someone once said to me about your children, when you rescue them, you're stealing their resilience. And that's that's really sits with me with the kids, is like, of course we know what you could do, you know, to your kids. We'll just do that. But if you keep telling them what to do, they never learn to the resilience. And it's the hard thing to do, to not tell them, not to rescue them. You know, of course, there are times when you just have to step in and help. But I think, just to your point, Stuart, it's like, know when to say, no, you have to figure this out.
You've got to let them fall off the bike and scrape their knees and fail.
Yeah, there has to be consequences, hasn't there?
You got it. Yeah.
I think also, I just similar. It's like, you don't give your kids a 12-month appraisal and sit down and go, here's all the things you did good. Or it's like you sit down and say, if they're a dick, like, you're not that behaviour is unacceptable, or you tell them at the time. You don't wait until 6 months later or the third or fourth time you do it. You nip it in the bud straight away.
And listen, they'll give you feedback.
Yeah. I always remember sitting with one of my children and saying, I'm doing you a disservice if I don't point out some things that I think, you know, I was having to choose my language, because if I went straight on, I just knew there was going to be a fight. So
kids are like the best way to practice leadership, because you're trying, because they're going to tell you straight. So you know when you miss fat. I'm so annoying with them, and I hear myself doing it because they'll ask me a question, and I'll always say, "Well, how could we work that out?" And we end up, and the poor kid's like, "Oh, I'm going to have to stop asking him questions," because I'll be like, "Look, Dad, how many of this or what?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but how would we work it out?" And I make him sort of sit and work it out, and he goes, "Oh, I wish I'd never asked him."
The worst thing is when it comes back on you. Like my youngest was asking me, what would you do differently today, Mum, to make it better tomorrow? Or what are the key thing you could change? And I'm like, oh man.
You got me. Got me one.
So where are you taking Golden Charter? What's next? What are you trying to do with your role at the moment?
What's amazing about Golden Charter is that we're owned by our funeral directors. So it was some forward-thinking funeral directors about 40 years ago created the business in response to disruption in the market, which was funeral plans. In the past, somebody died, you had a funeral, at-need funeral, and then this trend appeared about funeral planning, paying for in advance. So we appeared with that, and we were set up by funeral directors. So essentially, we're owned by our funeral director network, which means there's patients there. And so our role is to sustain and protect the independent funeral director network, of which they are the absolute pillars of the high street, because those are organisations that are sponsoring the local football team. They're the ones that are being charitable in town. Those are the ones that looked after your granny and your great granny, and you just know them. So we are deeply committed to the independent local funeral director network because they care about their communities. So our job is to deal with this quite a lot of disruption in our market. There are new ways of managing your end of life through what they would call a direct unattended cremation, which means that, as the name suggests, you aren't dealt with by a funeral director. When somebody dies, there'll be some form of private ambulance will come, and there'll be multiple, sometimes individuals taken to a site where they'll be cremated, and that's a perfectly acceptable way to deal with people when they've died. That might be because they've got no family or they've got limited funds, but we believe that product should be discussed in the broader context of grief and the care of family. And so we're very committed to helping people understand that if you want to talk about the end of life, you should sit down with the Independent Local Funeral Director Network. So we're running campaigns. All of our marketing and branding is all about saying we would encourage you to go and speak to an Independent Local Funeral Director Network so that you can get a proper understanding of what you need. It's a bit like when you take a mortgage, being crass. If you want to deal with your pension, you should speak to an advisor, a specialist, and say, well, here are your choices. Well, funerals are the same. If you're thinking about what you want to do at the end of your life, speak to an expert and they'll give you choices. And so our role is to get as many people as possible aware of the importance of going to your local funeral director, ideally an independent local funeral director, and saying, this is what I want to happen. They'll say, here are your choices. So Golden Charter's strategy is, as consumer behaviour changes, as people shop online more, as they expect more personalisation of what they want, because that's what the trends are, we need to respond to that, and we need to help our funeral directors respond to that with the offering that we put out there. And
I would imagine that cost finance is a big barrier for people even thinking about approaching that. So what options do they have on, I don't know, are there payment plans?
Yes.
Okay.
You can pay it over time, over a year. And as I said, the different types of funerals have different costs, and you don't have to pay for your plan. You can just have a plan. You don't have, when you say you have to pay for a plan, you don't have to pay for a funeral in advance. Have the chat. Tell people what you want to do, and if you want to pay for it, great. And there's different price points for the different funeral plans, and you can pay for it over time. The beauty of it, of course, and it's fairly obvious, but if you pay for it now, that's the cost of the funeral largely locked in. So if you buy it when you're in your early 50s, chances are you're not going to need it for well over 30 years, but it'll be that's it, paid for. You can imagine what the cost will be in 30 years' time. So it is helping your kids or your family, because you're locking the costs in now.
Because I guess a lot of people wouldn't even think about doing that because they would only think of going to the funeral directors at the point where somebody's died. So
exactly.
Maybe there's a whole education piece that you're helping.
And that's what we're saying. The most important conversation that you have never had. What is going to happen to you when you're dead? Where are you going? Who's looking after you? Are you going and cremated? Are you going into the ground? How do you want that to happen? What songs are going to be playing? And how would you like to pay for it? Would you like your family to pay for it or your estate? Because the important thing is, will your family members have access to the funds to pay for the funeral until such time as your estate's wound up and there's going to be funds available to do it. It's a cash flow question. And that's part of the discussion with the funeral director. And if you're worried about your family because they may not have sufficient cash, then pay for an advance. And it's not just put the money aside because you don't know when it's going to happen, whether that be enough. If you buy a plan, it's pretty much covered.
It's that kind and nice again, that, it's being kind to your family so that they can actually grieve, rather than having to deal with the admin, deal with how do I pay for this? I want to send mum or dad off in a fitting way, but I can't actually afford it, or putting them under more stress at the time. It's already a very stressful situation for them.
If you can take away that that worry, so that your family can focus on remembering you, being with each other, caring for each other at that difficult time, then that's great. That's that's what you should. We talked about rescuing your children. If you're going to put them in their first flat, you're going to maybe make sure they know, well, this is what rent is and this is how you pay it, and do you need help with your deposit? That's okay. So you do that throughout their life, and then at the point where they're probably most traumatized, you cut them loose. Good luck, kids. It's like, that doesn't make sense. Help them. Pay the deposit for the flat, pay the deposit, pay the funeral. This is what I want. This is what I need. You remember me. Think of all the great times, and that will be kinder.
Mm.
And so, apart from coming on things like this, how are you getting the message out there as to have those frank conversations?
First of all, I'm the least popular person at dinner parties now. Genuinely.
Are you saying you were most popular before, Chris?
No. I've moved off of second least popular behind the accountants. So that's not fair. I'm only kidding. No, because I talk about it now because I'm excited. I get excited about what I do, and I'm so committed to what Golden Charter are trying to achieve. So I talk about it. But more importantly, this week we're being on the radio, we're being on television. We have changed our marketing campaign. So, if you watch the right TV show, which your listeners may or may not, you'll see our adverts on the telly. Dancing Dad George, he's doing his playlist for his funeral. And of course, the song is Another One Bites the Dust. But the call to action there is go online, get on the phone, or visit your local independent funeral director where you see your seal. So we are all of our campaigning, our strategies about saying, go in the door of the independent local funeral director. You'll see a little seal in the window that says Golden Charter approved. That means you're going to get, we're a regulated financial services business. You get assurance around what you're buying, how safe the money's going to be. So that's what we're doing. Any chance I get, put it up in lights and get people to have the chat. What song do you want at your funeral? That's a good conversation starter. What are you going to listen to? What are you going to want to go into? What are you going to go out to? That's how we get the conversation started.
Well, I want something uplifting, guys, just in case. I'll put it out there.
Things can only get better.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, not so sure about that one.
So look, we hope lots of people go and take your advice and have the conversations with their loved ones and the independent funeral advisors and directors and actually get a plan in place to help people.
Yes, and I don't mean a plan financially. Let's be clear. Have the conversation. And if you want to pay for it, we can help, but have the conversation.
So, Chris, we always finish the podcast by asking our guests what their guiding principle in business is. What would you say?
So our guiding principle in business, we've covered quite a few of them as I've gone through. Focus, have a plan, ask questions, not answers. I guess when I was sort of trudging through the Meadows at 2 a.m. as a wee lawyer, doing a deal, loving it but knackered, as I was trudging up the Meadows, figuring out, gosh, this is late. Or when I was, in a repair centre, sort of elbow deep in a white Renault Clio, learning how to fix a car. Or when I was out on the road at Green Flag, working out how to do breakdown. All the times where you've been sort of in the thick of doing stuff in a business, or being quite stressed at times, or working late, or flying to Dublin all the time, or all of these moments. And this is probably a bit personal about me, but I think it matters in business as well. Any time I was sort of in the trenches going, this is hard work, my amazing father's word would ring in my ear. And he lives by a very simple mantra, which I have said many times. And what he always said to Chris's son, the only time success comes before work is in the dictionary. And I know that's a bit of a play on words, but it is never a truer thing and never a simpler way of working out. How do you get somewhere is you got to put the work in. And when it is feel hard, and when you're running your own business and it's like, I'm anxious about this, I'm waking up at 2 a.m, I'm worrying about the next deal, I'm worrying about the next product delivery, I'm worrying about payroll, all of those things are the things you have to do to be successful. It's the work. It doesn't come unless you put the work in, the education, the learning, the planning, the thinking, the doing, the development, being curious, all that stuff. So that's the thing that I think has helped me get through the fun and the hard times. And I think organizationally, that's the bit that makes the difference. The success comes after the hard work. So that's my dad, he's an amazing man, and it's always good to have that, wandering around with you.
Wise words. Look, Chris, fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've really loved it and wish you all the best.
And listen, thank you for inviting me in and giving me the chance to talk about Golden Charter. It's an amazing place, and we're sitting in Glasgow, and I think we should be really proud that the city's produced such a caring, special organisation.
Well done.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.